I clutched the land for sale notice in my hand, staring at the signature that looked almost like mine but not quite, and before I could even process what was happening, she rolled up in her white BMW Victoria Sterling, the Highland Gardens HOA president, wearing that smug little smile like she'd just beaten me at chess before I even knew the game had started. They'd managed to sell my family's three-generation farm for $50. No, seriously, 50. Just because I refused to power wash the chicken coop and because the scent of actual cow manure, God forbid, was threatening her precious property values. She looked at me with that cool, dismissive glance. "You can't do anything about this, Mr. Morrison," like she was untouchable, but she had no idea, not a clue, that the power she thought she held was exactly what would end up taking her down. Because this wasn't my first war, and I was done fighting it alone. Let me back up a sec. My name's David Morrison. I'm 47, and I'm what most folks would call a dyed-in-the-wool farmer. I'd lived on this land my whole life, tanned from the sun, hands rough from real work, and honestly, I was happy to keep to myself, just my vegetable patch, a handful of cows, and a good cup of coffee in the morning. Then the Highland Gardens subdivision got built right next door, and at first I thought, hey, maybe new neighbors would be good for business. Maybe I could sell some produce, build a little community, But nope, Victoria Sterling saw to it that my dream turned to dust real quick. First attack. She shows up at my door Tuesday morning wearing a blazer that probably cost more than everything I'm wearing combined, clutching her little clipboard. "Mr. Morrison," she says, "I'm Victoria Sterling, president of the Highland Gardens HOA. We need to discuss the impact your operation is having on the community." She gestures at my place like it's some biohazard. I tell her straight, I've got every permit, been farming here for 25 years, and last I checked, this was still America. But her smile gets tighter, eyes colder, and she starts talking about progress and compatibility and how their property values exceed $15 million. "Surely you understand," she says. "You know what I mean? Like I'm supposed to roll over just because she talks pretty." 2 days later, I get this official-looking letter telling me to move my livestock or face legal action. Something about municipal codes I'd never even heard of. I try calling, get stonewalled by her assistant. Then not even a week after, there's a bright orange notice tacked to my mailbox, a $500 fine for my fence. My fence. The one my dad and I built 30 years ago. Apparently it didn't fit the aesthetic of her kingdom. I head over to their community center, and there she is sipping espresso in an office that looks more like a law firm than a homeowners association. "Mrs. Sterling, this is ridiculous," I tell her. "My property isn't even part of your HOA." She doesn't even flinch, starts quoting zoning laws and community standards, and pretty much tells me straight to my face that the law and what her HOA wants aren't always the same thing. But that was just her opening act. Next, I get an invitation to a community meeting. I show up hoping to be heard, but it's a kangaroo court. 30 residents lined up like a jury Victoria, standing at the podium, clicker in hand, ready to put my life on the big screen. She puts up pictures of my farm angles that make it look like a junkyard, and she spends the next 20 minutes telling everyone I'm some kind of environmental menace. Folks nodding along, people I'd never even met already convinced I'm a threat. Didn't take long before my regular customers, local restaurants, farmers markets, start calling to drop me. One after another. Turns out Victoria had called them, claimed I was under investigation for sanitation issues. Not a shred of truth, but said with such authority that folks believed it. I go to confront her. She doesn't even look at me, just keeps arranging flowers cool as ice. "People have a right to be informed," she says, all fake innocence. "Reputation is everything in business." Yeah, that happened. Then the final blow, a team of surveyors out on my land one Monday morning marking boundaries, handing me an envelope with legal documents. According to the paperwork, Highland Gardens had bought my land for $50 using a tax lien foreclosure. A forged signature notary stamp county seal looked official as anything. But I'd never signed those papers. And here comes Victoria stepping out of her BMW like she's walking onto a movie set. "Good morning, Mr. Morrison. I see you've received the documentation." She goes on about opportunities to correct zoning incompatibilities, pretending it's all just business as usual. She tells me I'm in default over some obscure technicality, a paperwork error that conveniently means they now own my entire farm. "These things happen," she says, all condescending. I could barely breathe, realizing she'd managed to steal my land without ever setting foot in a courtroom. But here's what she didn't know. Before I bought this farm, I spent 20 years as a federal investigator specializing in white-collar crime. I've built cases that put millionaires in prison, traced money through shell companies in the Caymans, you name it. I quit because I was burned out, wanted a quieter life, but all those skills were still right there in the toolbox. Victoria Sterling had no clue she'd just picked a fight with the wrong guy. I dug in. Started by following the money trail through Highland Gardens finances. Wasn't long before I found that more than half their annual HOA dues were vanishing into consulting fees and special projects. Guess whose husband's company got a six-figure contract for landscape consulting? Or who paid herself for emergency maintenance on a community center built 5 years ago? You get the picture. But the real kicker was the property records. Victoria had pulled the same stunt on 5 other landowners, creating fake tax liens, forging signatures, scooping up valuable land for pennies, then flipping it to shell companies she controlled. It was organized but not careful. I gathered evidence, needed allies. Enter Robert Sterling, Victoria's husband, who'd been living in fear, secretly recording his wife and keeping records of everything. Then there was Sarah Chen, an accountant in the neighborhood already suspicious of the HOA's numbers. We joined forces, pooling files, emails, phone recordings, the works. Here's the twist when I dug all the way back to my property. Deed turns out the entire Highland Gardens subdivision was actually built on land leased from my family trust. Victoria hadn't just stolen my farm, she'd built her empire on ground that technically still belonged to me with a lease clause, allowing me to reclaim it if state or federal law was violated. So I called for a special meeting, invoked every bylaw I could, and this time I didn't show up in jeans and a flannel. I walked in wearing the same charcoal suit I used to wear in court, briefcase in hand. Victoria tried to shut me down, but I took the mic, reintroduced myself as David Morrison, former senior FBI investigator, and laid out every shred of evidence on the projector for the entire room. Sarah backed me up with her own independent audit. Robert stood up and confessed everything right there in front of his wife and all the neighbors. I should have stopped her, but I was afraid. And just as the room was about to erupt, 2 FBI agents, old colleagues of mine, walked in to execute the search warrants. The place went silent except for the sound of Victoria's carefully constructed world collapsing. The community voted her out on the spot. The feds charged her with fraud, racketeering, and conspiracy. She's serving 12 years now. Robert got probation for cooperating, and Sarah was elected the new HOA president. For the first time in decades, people actually knew where their money was going. Dues were cut in half, repairs got done, and the playground finally got fixed for real this time. We tore down the old sign at the entrance and put up a new one, Highland Gardens, where community comes first. Kids ran around planting tomatoes and sunflowers in the common gardens. Families held potlucks and played music in the park. I turned my farm into a field trip spot for local schools, let folks buy veggies right from the garden. Margaret, a widow who'd been fined for holiday decorations, brought me an apple pie at the Harvest Festival. And she said, I never thought I'd see this place become a real neighborhood again. So yeah, I lost my land for a minute, but in the end we got something way better, a real community. And here's the thing, it's never really about revenge. It's about standing up, doing what's right, and proving that ordinary people can make a difference, even if you have to dig deep and fight dirty when the bad guys play by their own rules. Now, some folks say I went too far or that I just got lucky. What do you think? Where's the line between justice and going rogue? I'd love to hear your take, because honestly, there's nothing more American than a good old-fashioned fight for what's right, especially when nobody sees it coming.